Welcome Timo, who will explain how they built the DLR website in less than 6 months. Thank you.
Plone is particularly well suited for running websites of large organizations that have lots of subsites, lots of departments, and that needs to scale. I will present today a success story of one of the websites that we built for the German Aerospace Center, abbreviated DLR for Deutsches Zentrum für Luft- und Raumfahrt. I will not say that again, just call it DLR, right? And we delivered that in April 2023, this year. And it was a particularly challenging project, but I think it shows the power of Plone 6. So a few numbers about DLR. It's one of the largest research institutions in Germany. It's the National Research Center for Aerospace, Energy, Transportation, and Research. It has more than 10,000 employees with 55 institutes, 30 locations, 4 foreign offices, and 8 research stations. And it controls an annual budget of 1.4 billion euros. And if you have been to my PloneConf talk last year, you know this slide. At Kit Concept, we work a lot for government agencies or organizations that are publicly funded, like research institutions. And last year, I presented the research institution Jülich, Forschungszentrum Jülich, FZJ abbreviated. And both use cases were like kind of similar in a sense. I will show you the details. But both FZJ and DLR are largely funded by the government. And in Germany, we have a CMS called Government Site Builder, which is required to be used by government agencies, and government-funded agencies also tend to use that system. And the idea of the Government Site Builder is great, to be honest, because the idea is to have one CMS system, or one system for each requirement that you have, but one CMS system for the entire IT needs when you build a public portal. It's hosted by the state IT, so it's easy for them. It's centralized, and it's supposed to be open source, right? So in theory, that's the right thing to do. And the problem here is that the reality of the Government Site Builder is that it's an application with more than 20 years, that's more than 20 years old. It's a Java-based application that at the beginning had a Windows user interface, like a Windows application to interact with it. At a later point, they added a web-based interface, and I will show you how it will look like, how it looks like. So this is the most modern version that they have, right? This is not from the 90s, but the most recent version that they have. They never really open sourced it, even though that was promised right from the start, and they still say that on their website. It's just not open source, neither technically nor internally. And overall, it's a system that I would personally say has no chance wouldn't stand a chance on the free market. There are only 1 to 2 agencies in Germany that do services on top of that, so they are kind of monopolists. And multiple editors told us that it's not uncommon that they have like 1,000 open tickets in their issue tracker, and the agency, they don't do anything about it because they're monopolists, they don't need to, so they don't really care. So in 2020, they wanted to start over and do it right this time. So they published Government Site Builder 10. They promised this time to really open source it, to get it right, to modernize it, everything. And DLR was supposed to be the first large organization that was supposed to go to Government Site Builder 10. So they migrated their main portal from Government Site Builder 7 to Government Site Builder 10. And hundreds of sub-sites and institute sites were supposed to follow. The problem was that Government Site Builder 10 was, again, a half-baked version. They replaced lots of things. It was supposed to be just an upgrade, but in reality, it was a rewrite. The software was in alpha state, and again, they failed to open source it. And they also failed to deliver core features of a CMS, like delivering an image. And that's, I wish that would be a joke, but that was one of the main problems. So DLR had to cancel that project. So they migrated their main portal to the system, but it was barely working, and they had a hard time really keeping it up. As we speak, the German government also canceled the Government Site Builder 10 version. by now. So to sum it up, it was a total disaster for both DLR and for the German government. The German government doesn't like talk about this like openly, of course, but for DLR it was a disaster because think about it, they were promised like, hey, we have this new version, right? Upgrade, everything will be better. They tried it and it was like a mess, right? But then the White Knight appeared. So DLR made a pretty smart move, in my opinion. They hired an external project manager to help them with that. And meet Jan Hamsen here. I'm sorry for the lo-fi image here. He asked me not to put his picture in here because he's a humble person, right? He's like, he gets work done and stuff, but he didn't want to be in the picture. But he told me that I should rather like tell you folks how the process that he created, right? Or how he approached the problem when he was facing with that. So as said, he's a very structured guy. So he started with requirement management, talking to people, asking what do they need. He came up with a long list of possible solutions for CMS, then a short list. They did test installation and everything. And then they reached out to 2 CMS, so when they had a short list of 3 CMSs, they reached out to 2 CMS vendors for each system and asked them to pitch Plone. And at that point, they approached us, and we didn't know back then what the client was about. They just told us, hey, pitch Plone, and we did, of course. I mean, that's great, right? I love to pitch Plone. So the CMS requirements that they wrote down was the CMS needs to fit their needs. It needs to be enterprise ready and integrates well with their current IT infrastructure. It should have batteries included because they needed fast results, right? Because the previous project failed, so they need something that fits their needs. It needs to be scalable because DLR is involved, for instance, in a Mars mission, and lots of people will go there, right? Because they do fancy and amazing stuff. The system is supposed to be secure because, of course, it's a high-profile target for hackers because it's a research center, right? And it's a high-profile website. It was supposed easy to use for editors because hundreds of editors, training costs, onboarding costs, and everything. They wanted it to be open source and flexible to being able to adapt to their needs. So we pitched Plone when there was a short list of 3 content management systems: Drupal, Neos, and Plone. If you don't know Neos, and I'm sorry to bring German stuff again here on the page, on the stage, it's a spin-off of Typo3, which again is a German thing, but they have a pretty good market share in Germany. And Neos was a spin-off of Typo3. So the Typo3 community faced similar problems that we had, right? Like an outdated stack, so they said, let's start over. And Neos is an open source CMS, a true open source CMS. It has a pretty recent JavaScript stack with React, and it targets the enterprise market. So it's really pretty similar to Plone, right? To Volto or Plone 6. But Neos is more a page builder that has lots of features, and some editors were struggling with the user interface. And Neos was actually out in the process pretty early because training costs would have been too much, and they wouldn't been able to create the content in a fast way, which they needed because they weren't under time pressure. So with Neos out, it was really a bit like a classic CMS like Drupal versus Plone, because early in the process they decided that they want Volto and not Classic. And Drupal is a pretty tough competitor. We know that Drupal is used a lot worldwide. NASA is using Drupal. Drupal doesn't have the market share like Typo3 in Germany at least, but it's a regular competitor. So at the end, I wasn't involved in the decision-making process, so I can just tell what they told me, right? But the user-friendliness and the up-to-date technical stack, and also that we showed them that we did a previous project that was very similar to what their needs were, Plone win. And that was like the first important step, but think about the situation that they have been in. So they stopped the government site builder project for the main portal, and all the institutes were promised that they would soon migrate to the new system. If you have worked as a university or a larger organization like I did, you know what that means, right? If you are dealing with institutes and you make promises and then you tell them, hey, you know what, like it's not going to work, like wait until forever. As said, DLR has 10,000 employees, more than 100 organizational units, so the portal, the 55 institutes, 30 locations, the career portals, and lots of other organizational units, and they were all waiting. So after Jan Harmsen, the project manager, started, he was faced with this huge challenge, and they were under a lot of time pressure, both from stakeholders, but also from politics, internal and external, because, as said, the DLR is largely funded by the German government. So they give all the money, right? And they wanted results. So they approached us, what usually happens, and they asked us, like, just in theory, like, could you deliver that until X? I won't say the date here, but they ask us that. And that's a normal thing that you do, right? But given the time pressure that they were under, it was a tight deadline that they gave us. And my first reaction was like, no, just no, right? Impossible. Because it's not our philosophy to promise clients something that's impossible to do. Some agencies do that to just get the job, and then they bend like the timeline and stuff, but this is nothing that I want to do, and that I never did. The second thing was, we were still in the middle of the FZJ project, and it wasn't launched yet. And one other thing that's also important for me, if we have a really large project like DLR was, like, we finish stuff first, and then we do the next project, right? Because we're not that big as a company. So we basically said not under those conditions. But of course, we were looking for solutions, and we sat together with DLR and with Jan Harmsen, with the project manager, and it turned out in the process, when we were pitching Plone and showing FZJ, that literally everything that they asked for, we could show them, like, hey, we did that for FZJ, like, literally, 2 or 3 months ago. So the question arose, what if we would take over the code base from FZJ? Because we were in a hurry, right? We needed to deliver, and that was the most important thing. So we realized when they asked us this question that we have an unfair advantage, which is open source. Because FZJ encouraged us, or we encouraged FZJ, I don't know, it would, like, kind of both is true, to open source lots of the parts that we had on our code base. So we already had lots of blocks that were already open sourced, and when you open source something, you think about how to make it reusable, how to make it themable. So we gave this some thoughts, and then something pretty unique happened. FZJ and DLR signed a contract. A contract about a mutual exchange of open source component at no cost. So they basically both said, okay, we'll open source most or as much as we can, and we'll just exchange the components, right? And it doesn't matter, like, who pays it at the end, because of course they're also both part of a larger body, and everything there is funded by the state anyways. And this is something that I'm particularly proud of, because it's public money that they have, and open source is a perfect chance to use that public money as good as possible. So they signed that contract, and this, together with the fact that the client was willing to make compromises and prioritize delivery time over features, allowed us to come up with a timeline. Of course, we never discussed prioritize delivery time over quality. We wouldn't do that. But this allowed us to come up with a timeline. And if you have been at the Beethoven sprint, you might have seen this on the left side of my office. And this is the real thing. This is the real timeline. This defined, like, 1 year of my life. And I still, whenever anybody asks me for a timeline, I always do this in my office. And I, even though it's gone now, like, I do this and see if the timeline is there. So ignore the done thing here. It's on the Kanban board. I didn't have enough time. So the problem when looking at this timeline is that it only shows you a small portion of the real thing, because the CMS implementation, or what we did as an agency, is just a small implementation of the entire project. So think about it. DLR had to make a decision for a new CMS. They needed to do a tender, find an agency, then think about the CMS implementation. After that, you need to train people, you need to create content, do translation, set up the IT infrastructure. In an organization as big as DLR, this is a huge challenge. So taking all this into consideration and the timeline, we had 6 months. And you can imagine this is a tough fight, right? Because you say like, okay, we need this amount of time, and then the people that come after you, the content editors and everything, they have less time, right? So it's a tough fight, and at the end you have a deadline and you need to fit everything. But in the end, we accepted the challenge because we knew that we know the use case pretty well because we just did it with FZJ. And we did something similar, very similar. They allowed us to take over the FZJ code base, and large parts were already open source and configurable. So we thought we could do it. Though it was still a tight deadline, so we had to do some tricks. One trick was that we implemented features, like here on February, March, before the project start, the search. We implemented that in the FZJ code base and open sourced it so we could take it over. A second thing was the project setup. We had to do some tricks there as well because DLR launch, FZJ launch was there. And what we did there was that we started the DLR project within the FZJ repository at first. We created a policy product on the back end and an add-on on the front end that works, thanks to the power and flexibility of Python and Volto in the front end. And we started the visual design process as soon as the ink was dry on the contract. So on May 1st, we got the official go on the project, that's the post is above. And 2 weeks later, we launched FZJ successfully, like this here, and we forked the code base from FZJ with our customization. And our goal was September 1st. That was supposed to be the internal launch, where the editors were supposed to take over the system. So 5.5 months and hundreds of stakeholders waiting, so no pressure here, right? So as said, we started with the layout as soon as possible. We had 3 months altogether for the layout, but our plan said that after 2 months we need to have the layout ready, so we start with the implementation, right? So we had an overlap over things, which is something that you usually try to avoid. Especially when it comes to visual design, because lots of stakeholders, more than 100 organizations, somebody needs to make decisions, and that takes time, because it's lots of people. And on top of that, they told us that, hey, you know what, there's also a corporate design change coming during your development time. And of course we said, okay, we will just ignore that fact, but we kept it in the back of our minds when we did the design. Right, that we know, okay, there might be changes. So before I show you what we came up with, I will show you the existing design that they have. And when you look at an existing page, you try to grasp the information architecture, right? And I mean, you see here that the theme is quite, let's call it colorful. And I have to admit that I rarely see a project where it was so hard for me to grasp the information architecture on the page, which is understandable because DLR is huge, but the site wasn't really helping with understanding what to find where. So I had a fresh view on things. So we tried a radically different approach to the existing theme then. We wanted to have a clear information architecture and content structure that made it easy for users to understand the content and find the right content. We wanted to focus on simplicity and a very minimal design, because we were working on a portal, and the other institutes and organizational units that might want to be visually distinctive were about to follow, right? So if you go all in at the beginning and have like a super fancy theme, then it's really hard to have a distinctive theme, and then you will end up with like maybe even more colors than we see here, right? And it was clear to us that we don't want that. But we had help with that, because Jan Hamsen, the project manager, and the DLR team, they were very, very well prepared. Jan Hamsen and his colleague Dominik Steppler created low-fi prototypes with the information architecture and templates for the content types. So we didn't have to do that. We did that at FZJ, but not in DLR. So they prepared all that. Their user-centric thinking and UX-first thinking, because as I said, Jan Hamsen's company is a UX consultancy company, matched very well with our philosophy of a reduced design and what we do in general in Plone 6 or Volto. So the first thing that we did was the front page that you can see here. So a very clean design. At the beginning, we have a slider there with the corporate design colors of DLR. Here you see the news items that you have grid-like appearance, the most recent news items. Then you have a different section from within the DLR, news items from within the DLR. You have a video blog that introduces DLR. You have a blog that introduces DLR overall, the DLR printed magazine. You have events here, where DLR has its own events portal, because you can imagine they have lots of events. And then here's career, the career website, or teasering the career website. So after we got approval for the front page, we moved to the landing pages, because we had an incremental approach to everything, right? So we created the design first, then the implementation, and then moved on to the next one. So the next thing after the approval for the main portal site and the overall design was the landing pages. So this is the about the DLR landing pages, one of the 5 main landing pages of 5 sections. At the beginning, we have what we call a highlight block with an image, and then a text, and a text. Then you have a grid block here, the video block again, and a few teaser blocks about the structure of the DLR. Because as I said, they're huge, so they have to have good landing pages that give you an idea what you need where. Besides the main landing pages, they had lots of other needs for landing pages, mainly other research-related landing pages, research areas, research topics, and research infrastructure. And you see them here. On the left side, you have the main research areas. They have 6 of them. That's something like space, energy, or transport, so the big topics and areas that DLR is working in. In the middle, you have one of 3 research topics, something like hydrogen, quantum technologies, artificial intelligence, specific research topic that fits into the big 6 research area. And on the right side, you have one of 350 research infrastructure content types or landing pages, which are, most of them are large-scale research facilities like Airbus aircrafts, or SOFIA. It's a flying observatory on a Boeing 747, which is pretty fancy. They did that together with NASA. I'm pretty sure you saw a picture of that at some point. And they had lots of projects and missions, like the Mars Express mission, for instance, where DLR built a high-resolution stereo camera on board of the ESA Mars Express mission, or the International Space Station, for instance. So pretty cool project and missions, actually. This is the page. So we have a title, we have a head title, then you see a listing block variant that shows all the pictures that they have, and DLR, as you see, they have beautiful pictures, so that matches also very well with our reduced design, because we wanted to show those awesome pictures that they have. And if you have a design that has lots of colors, like, you don't focus on the pictures, right? And because they had great pictures that work quite well. Then you see the introduction block here on the right side. You see that they have lots of data that they need to show there, so they're using the table block, and at the end they're using a grid block. But those pages had the full flexibility. All the content types that I show you uses the block-based system where we had templates. So that makes it easy for editors to have a good default, but they're not bound to that. They can change that at any time. The block system gives them this flexibility. DLR, as a large organization, has lots of locations, subsidiaries, and offices. So we created content types for that. For the 30 locations, the 4 offices abroad in Washington, Tokyo, Paris, and Brussels. And that needed to be reflected on their website. So those are the content types. They're also block-based to give them full flexibility. That was important because DLR has small locations, like Bonn, like my home city, but also very big locations like Berlin, where they have 5 subsidiaries, at least, or 6 even. So you need different kind of presentations for those websites. This is Berlin. And again, we use a template as a default guidance for editors, but they're free to do what they needed. So, and Berlin obviously needed a different landing pages than Bonn. So those content types that I showed you are all used by DLR editors to categorize content. So think about a news item that you want to show on the front page or somewhere else for a specific topic, or on a landing page, or on an institute page. So you want to categorize that and then show it. So on the right side here, you see the categorizations that we have. So you have the research areas, the research topics, the locations and offices, the institutes, the project and missions, so everything that I showed you. And on top of that, keywords and internal keywords that allow you to categorize everything. And those are all vocabularies and based on the content types. So when you categorize that content, and we migrated also lots of content, which I will come to later, you can use this categorization in listing blocks or search blocks. On the left side, you see the listing block. This is from the front page, and it looks like a grid block, but it's actually a listing block. Because in the end, it shouldn't matter if you want to automatically create content or if you want to manually place things. That should be a decision of the editors and what makes their life easier. And in this case, they said, we want just a checkbox on our news items, and when we create a new one, we want to set a checkbox, and it should automatically appear. So this is actually a listing block variant. That's also something that we work on both in core and in Vol2Light theme to have that as well. On the right side, you see the main news section of DLR. So if you go to the news section, you see all news items, and they have a lot. They have 3 to 4 news items every single day. And you want to be able to search in that. So we use the awesome search block with search facets, so you can filter by year, research area, locations, institutes and facilities, and text, and that makes it really easy. And this is really the out-of-the-box thing that our editors love. On top of that, we create even more content types. We create content types for audio and video. As you can imagine, DLR has lots of fantastic video content and audio content. So on the left side, you see the video content type where you can use YouTube, Vimeo, or Quick Channel. And of course, you can also embed those video content objects anywhere on your page with the video or audio block. So both works, but at DLR, because they have so many videos, they want to be able to filter videos and audios on their website. So we created those 2 content types. On the right side, you see their podcasts, where they need to support SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple Music. So this is the audio content type. Of course, we also had Plone standard content types that we use more or less out of the box, like news and events. So this is a news item. You see an image on top, then the introduction block, so this is pretty similar to the other ones, then regular content. And on the right side, this is the bottom. You have contact persons there and kind of a call to action block that's always there for all the news items that I want to show there. The event is pretty similar. It's also block-based. The only difference is, like in Plone, you have this fixed block that shows all the metadata, so the start date, the end date, to make it easy for users to grasp like the most important information. And at the end of the page, again, here is the contact block. At DLR, every single time they publish a news item, they want to add a spokesperson, like the contact for a spokesperson or a specific researcher, so that press people can reach out to them. And this is what we created a contact block for. So we had a content type that you could then that holds all the contact information that we migrated from the old site, and then you could create a contact block and choose from that long list of people, search and add them there, drag and drop them, of course, and then you have the context there. And you have the ability to contact those persons via a contact form, because of course we don't want to expose email addresses. So this is what you see on the right side. So my colleague Eric Andre open sourced a collective person, which does that person that allows you to that gives you a person content type. And the part with the person block, it's something that we're eager to open source as part of a Plone distribution that we're currently working on. But to sum it up, we built 11 DLR-specific content types plus the Plone default content types that I showed you. All are blocks-based, all have internal templates to make it easier for editors. But for maximum flexibility, they are blocks-based, and for low maintenance for editors, they use internal templates. And this is all possible because of blocks. I said that during this keynote, last year's keynote is all about blocks, right? So I will show you a few blocks that we open sourced. The first element on the page, on the front page or on landing pages, is either the highlight block or the slider. This is the slider that you saw on the front page. you have 6 different color gradients based on the corporate design of DLR, plus black and white that we don't show here. And you have the ability to show the text on the left side, on the right side. So this gives you 16 different combinations if you ignore the customization options for the buttons and the head title. The second block that we use on the landing pages has 5 corporate design colors and the option to show a button or don't show a button, so this gives you 10 combinations. And then, of course, we use the teaser and the grid block that you saw a lot and that I also talked about in my keynote. They were first developed as an add-on product at Kit Concept, and other companies did the same, but then with Plone 6.1 and Volto 17, we included that into the core. So this is the teaser block. It has the options to show the image on the left side, on the right side, or on the middle. You see that on the right side here. And you can display different content objects, like you can display a page or a news item, an event, or a file. News item and events will show like start date, end date, or the publication date. Files will use a different aspect ratio. So this altogether gives you 24 combinations for the teaser block with the background color gray and white. This is the grid block, also part of core. It used to be Volto Blocks Grid add-on product, or still the add-on product. The grid block allows you to have between 1 and 4 columns. So we use the default, what Plone gives you. You have the background color white and gray. You can use a teaser within a grid block, so you can display pages, news items, events, files. You can choose to have a sub-block with text that you see on the right side there. You can have images. You see that here, and you can have files. This is what you see here. Files at DLR mainly mean printed magazines, PDFs, so we use a different aspect ratio for that one out of the box. And you have the ability to create listing blocks within a grid. So this gives you 14 combinations. So altogether, you have more than 100 combinations altogether for the blocks, not taking into account being able to change the order of blocks, right? Just if you look at individual blocks. So I didn't do the exact math, but we roughly have 20 blocks, and each has roughly 25 options. You saw that the grid block has more than 100, but let's say 25. So this gives you more than 500 combinations for just blocks and not taking into consideration the order. So if you take into account that every single block needs to be responsive, work in different devices, that the view and the edit view needs to be similar, that they need to be A11Y compliant, and remember, the size of the font defines if the contrast is sufficient. So you can't just say this background color and this font color like match and they're good. You have to look at every individual combination. They need to match the corporate design specification that you have in every larger organization, and the communication team is really keen that this is met. And you have to document this on top of everything and train people to do the right thing. So this is a big challenge. So how do you test 500 combinations? Even though we were super strict at Kit Concept with our minimalist approach and say like we don't allow too many things, just the bare minimum, how do you test all those combinations? We use Kit Concept Content Creator, which is based on Collective Content Creator, and we create example content for all the combinations that we have. We run our A11Y tests and other tests against it. We use this for manual regression testing and also automated visual regression testing. This is enough for an entire talk, but I will briefly show you that. Victor in the talk before also showed you that for Volto Light Theme. So those are the examples. Those are all the blocks. You can see it's actually more than 25 because you have the pagination there, and those are the content types that you have. And this is just the listing of everything that you have on the page. It's also nice for editors because they can check all the options that they have. And we choose the grid block, for instance. You have the teaser standard here. If you use a teaser, then you have a teaser news item, a teaser event, sorry for the German in there, and a teaser file, and a teaser image, an image, and a text. Those are all the options. But that's not everything, right? If you look closely, it's just like 2 columns and 3 columns, so you have to go on the detailed page. So this is really just the overview page, so this is the real thing. So there you have 1 column, teaser, 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, then everything on gray background color, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. So it's really a lot of pages and a lot of sub-pages that you have to do. And if you take into consideration like all the variations that you have, Remember Neos from the first slide and why it was out early in the process? WordPress and Neos and other CMSs are really more page builders. And they try to give editors as many options as possible and as much freedom as possible, which is a good thing if you know how to handle that. But it could cause that we're super restrictive what we do, because we do the math, actually, and see how many combinations do we have. And we want to test all of them. We want to make sure that editors can't, like, slip their mouse and do something wrong that's not compliant with the corporate design manual and stuff like that. And if you really want to do that, then you have to restrict the numbers, because otherwise you have pretty fast and exponential function that you can't control, and then you have like 10,000 or 100,000 combinations, and there's just no way that you can test it. You can live with it and say, we don't care if the editor does it wrong, it's their fault. But this is not our philosophy. We want really to test everything and want to make sure that we have a CMS that takes care that the editors can only do what is allowed. And that was a pretty important lesson for us to learn. But that was not everything. So I showed you blocks and content types that we did. As I told you before, the government site builder failed to deliver images in a performant way. So image optimizations were really important for DLR. So we took the extra mile when it comes to image handling. We introduced source sets in the DLR project. They later became part of core thanks to Piero's work. I hope you've been at his talk, one of his talks. So this is already core in Plone 6.1 and Volto 17. But we did a bit more. We introduced a library called blur hash that gives you a better loading experience. And the idea is that you generate a representation of the image based on the colors that the image has, and load the thing as soon as possible, because it's just a hash, and it loads very quickly. So you see this pretty early in the loading process. And then the only thing that happens is this. You see here that it barely jumped, and this is what Google calls cumulative layout shift. And the DLR website, check it out, go there. It has 0.001%. And I asked Alok the other day to fix the past 001 thing. Not for the client, of course, they wouldn't ask us to do that, but I personally wanted to do that. And interesting enough, it's a thing on the top. It's a margin on the top. It's not even the image. So I really like the blur hash approach here. So check it out. It's really nice, especially if you load more images on the site, then you really see the full page pretty early. But DLR had more image-related requirements than that. They wanted to have or introduce at the beginning a digital asset management system together with the CMS that was just not possible under the time constraints. But as said, DLR has lots of images, and some of them are very high resolution, and they wanted to have something like a digital asset management system. So we thought about the options, and as said, DLR was willing to make compromises, and we came up with something that we call DUMS Lite, which consists on an enhancement on the sidebar and on what we call a DUMS Lite view. So this is the enhancement of the sidebar that Rob worked on. So say you create an image, regular block, you go to the right side, and you can switch there between the regular content view and a view where you see all the images. So if you're in the content structure, you usually want to use the regular thing so you can navigate. But as soon as you have a folder with images, you want to switch to the image view so that you can see the real image. Then you can scroll the images and choose the right one and see if you can find some. But this is only on the content structure. Like a DUMS is usually a global thing that shows you all the images, and you can do that here as well. So you can choose to say, I want to see all the images of the page, and then you can filter them here with a search, right? So you have the view in the sidebar, all the images, search, you can find it. It's Solr based, the sidebar search, so this is pretty powerful. That was also key here, that you have good search capabilities. The second thing that we worked on is this DUMS Lite view. It's a full width view of what you saw in the sidebar. It gives you the ability to show your own images or all images and sort them and filter them by different criteria. Again, something for a full talk again. talking about a full talk, search, we had the search panel, you know how complex things are, and Ramon trolled me in his talk. He showed a screenshot of this, so this is old search, but DLR is really happy with it, what we did. So we did the regular Solr stuff, so we have prefix, suffix search, subterm search, fuzzy search, stemming, synonyms, search facet, multilingual, and everything that you can do with traditional search, let's call it like that. DLR has lots of subsites, so when you search the portal, it searches the entire DLR with all the subsites, all the institutes. When you search on an institute website, by default it searches only in the institute, and you have a toggle where you can go to the main portal if you want. We also have content type based boosting, so news items, for instance, are more important, or the research areas. Think about the research areas or the institute, or an institute name. You search for Institute for Aeroelastic, for instance, and you have like, I don't know, 100 news items with that term, and this term occurs more often in a news item. But you still want to be the institute the first result, so we boosted that. Another use case was we wanted to boost the newest content. So what happens at DLR, as said, is largely funded by the government. So what happens is they have a news item there where a politician visited something, and then they search, and they want to be on top, of course, right? Because it's a news item. And what you usually need to do is do a specific thing for politicians, but this time we got it right, and we just boosted recent content. And it works quite well. You can go to DLR, try it out, go to any news item, search for a term in there, and it's very likely that it will be one of the first three search results. Again, enough for a separate talk, but to sum up things and come up to an end, this is the timeline that we had. So we forked FZJ and launched FZJ. After that, we worked on a layered implementation, content types, blocks, dump slide, categorizations, context, video, audio content type, search, and lots of more stuff. And at the end, 1st of September, we delivered what we promised in time, in budget. And we're done, right? Not quite, of course not. Mr. Hamsen, ProContext, and a few other agencies, their work just started. We needed to do trainings. Of course, they did that like in a few weeks with all the editors, like minimal training that works for FZJ because of the user-friendliness of Plone. And they needed to create content and translation. So meet Andrea Haag and Philipp Burchard. Andrea Haag is the product owner, and they're both the chief editors. And as Jan Hamsen, they were prepared very well. So even during the development phase, they started to create content and translations. And as soon as they had to go, they orchestrated a plethora of content editors, internal and external, to create content as fast as possible. We helped them with the migration. They did a complete redesign and a complete new direction, new information architecture and everything. But even if you build content from the scratch, you need base content like images, PDF files, and stuff. So we took our FZJ migration and adapted the government site builder version from 7 to 10 and migrated everything. And if Errico is on the stage and tells you that he's not good at things and that he works with smarter people than he is, I think I thought I was pretty good at migrations. But since Errico took over the migrations, like, he put it to a different level, and it's amazing what he did. So thanks, Errico. That's like, I told you that in person multiple times, but the stuff that you do with migration is just amazing and far better what I ever did. So we migrated 1K pages, 4K contacts, 4K files, 30K images, 5K news items, 1K videos. And then you're done, right? But not quite yet, because we had to set up the infrastructure. David, Errico did that. Fred was on board later after the relaunch, but he worked on the open source part of it, so he contributed to the project without knowing it. And they did a fantastic job, both for the Plone community and for our projects. So we shared the best practices with the community already. David gave a talk about that. But it was not easy, even after we set up all this infrastructure that David showed, because, of course, Plone wasn't the only system. So we killed Government Site Builder, but they have, let's say, a few more CMSs in the bucket, and they all need to go through one, like, big F5, big IP set. thing called. So that was a huge challenge that we needed to integrate that with Plone and the links and stuff. It was really a huge challenge. But thanks to DLR IT that made lots of things possible under that time pressure, we made that work. We did performance tests, load testing, security audits, caching. Again, Erico did a fantastic job there. Everything we did is in the Plone community, is upstream. So on World Plone Day 2023, and I have to say we were the first, right? So we decided in January or so about the date, the launch date, and Plone came after that. So on World Plone Day, April 26th, 1 year after the project start, 11 months after the FZJ fork, we launched DLR-DE. So please go there, have a look, check it out. I think doing DLR showed the power of Plone 6 and the power of open source. We were able to do that only because we open sourced so many things. The flexibility of the block-based system and Volto allowed us to go incrementally, things that you usually don't want to do. Designers don't want to work incrementally, they need the full picture. But we made it work by prioritizing like the time constraints over other things without, I think, sacrificing quality. I really love the theme that we did, or that our designer did. We had an amazing team, of course, like Alok, Rohit, Balázs, Rob, Victor, Erico, David, Jakob, Steffen, Thomas, Jonas, Thomas Borg, our designer. So that was a great team, but to be honest, the key success factor in that project was Jan Hamsen, the project manager. He orchestrated everything within DLR. He allowed us to focus on what we're good at, developing. So main credits go to him, really. But also the chief editors at DLR, Andreas Haag and Philipp Burscheid, they did a fantastic job orchestrating all those external agencies or internal people and DLR IT who made that possible. So in the end, it was a large group of people working together towards a common goal. And talking about people working together towards a common goal, we're really proud that we open source large parts of our code base, thanks to FZJ and DLR doing the right thing and signing that contract. Lots of things that I showed you are in Plone 6.1, like the teaser block, like the grid block. The other things are open source add-on products that you can use. All the effort that we put into the theme and making it right, we put in Volto Light theme, thanks to our Volto and theme mastermind, Victor. He presented that before me. And use it, go to DLR-DE, check it out. If you like it, try out Volto Light theme with all the open source blocks in there. It has everything. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Timo. Any question?
So it runs on their infrastructure, right?
Yes.
Do you get a support and maintenance contract, or they're just taking care of it from here on in?
I'm not sure if I can talk about this because that's tender related and that's out of my control, so they will do that. But we run it on their infrastructure, and they will do something about that soon.
How many developers do you need to build all this website in these few months?
That's a good question, because we never had to use the entire team. So altogether at KitConcept we're 17 people, but I don't know. Victor, can you help me? Like how many people worked on during the I mean the core development time was really those 5.5 months where we worked our butts off. And most of the people were working in that, so yeah, maybe 10 to 12 in that period, I would say. Yeah, so 10 people for 6 months. Yeah. And then it depends, like we have experts within KitConcept for certain things, right? So if we needed heavy lifting in core things, Volto, Victor was taking care of lots of things, so then Rob helped us, or when it came to search, Balázs did a lot of things. So that really depended who we needed at a certain point of time, and we had to improvise a lot, as you might have seen. Yeah, but roughly that number.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else?
Congratulations, impressive project, and thanks for open sourcing so many parts of that. The community is much, much richer because of that. Since you gave us so much, we want more. What about the damn slide thing? I really like that. Is that open sourced?
Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah, that's Rob. Like the sidebar thing is pushed. Oh, isn't it yet? Okay, crap. But I asked him to do that, so maybe during the sprint. So the sidebar thing is something that we need in Volto Core, definitely.
Yes.
And I asked Rob multiple times to do that, but like he's busy, we are busy, right? So yeah. So that should definitely go into the next version of Plone, and it shouldn't be that hard. The DUMS light view, it's something that I'm a bit reluctant because the DUMS use case is incredibly, incredibly complex. And I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do yet, because it always has been this main decision: do you want to have like one global view, or do you want to put things where they belong? And having worked on DUMS light solutions over the past like 10 to 15 years, I still tend to put things where they belong and not in one like giant folder. So I don't think we're there yet to open source it. And our philosophy is, and I think Guido mentioned that in his talk, that it doesn't help if you just open source everything that you do. You need to put extra effort into making it reusable so people can actually use it, because otherwise you're spammed with lots of add-on products, and that doesn't help. This was something that I learned from own experience. At the beginning, I just open sourced everything, and I thought I would do something good for the community. But my honest opinion is that you need to go the extra mile and make sure that it's really something that you reuse internally in 2 to 3 projects, and then you can open source this, because otherwise you give people just the wrong assumption that it's ready when it's not really ready, and that doesn't really help. But if you're interested in anything here, and I didn't mention the open source thing, I just realized that I forgot a few, then just approach me and we're happy to share, right? That also happens with the source set. For instance, we talked about this in the Volto community and said we have that here, so if anybody's willing to work on this in open source, we're more than happy. We didn't have time during those 6 months because we were crazily busy, but we're always happy to show like small parts, or when anybody is willing to help us, right? So if you have anything, just approach us, and we'll help and work together with you folks.
On the DUMS stuff, I'm wondering if you come across the Drupal Acquia. It seems to be getting quite marketed a lot. I wonder if you looked at the features of that and how it might compare to what we could do with Volto.
We mainly focused in the process on commercial digital asset management systems, to be honest, so external ones, because that was the wish of DLR. Understandable, because they have so much content and not everything is supposed to go there, but we realized that integrating an external system is incredibly hard, because they don't have a content structure. You don't want to rebuild the content structure. Their multilingual capabilities are very limited. Also, their permission model is very limited, and you need to sync all that. And if you have a use case where you say, okay, I want to depublish that image because we don't have the rights any longer or something like that, then you might end up with a broken page and things like that. And then when multilingual comes into it, it's just horrible, because we got multilingual right in Plone, but it's a lot of work, and like digital asset management systems, they have no clue about what multilingual is really. They only have a flag that says like this is one language and this is the other, and this makes it impossible to connect those two. So this was our experience looking at the market, and then our recommendation to the client as well. So specifically, I can't say anything about that, but I would love to have a look to see what would be possible. But the commercial systems didn't offer anything that was interesting, in my opinion, or a decent option.
Okay, thank you, Timo. Big applause for him. Now we stop.